Print Your Games podcast, a podcast about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for games. I'm one of your hosts, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
And I'm Kristen Sowards, also known as Lost Spheres.
And I've had a very fun and interesting week this week, Kristen. I got to go to Gen Con.
You got to go.
Yeah. We didn't have an episode last week because I was traveling forth to Gen Con in Indianapolis to look at all the pretty game stuff and see if there was any 3D printing news to be had in the world. And oh boy, was there.
There was?
There was.
At the big physical prefab high retail con, there was printing news. Okay.
Oh yeah, there was lots of 3D printed stuff there, and a whole lot more booths have big old giant statues now that are very clearly have layer lines, and that's fun to see. Yeah, and then I come home and I'm like, as it goes when you're at Gen Con, if you want to follow the news about what's going to happen at a con, the best place to be is not at that con.
Yeah.
Because all the best news breaks on the socials, and I'm too busy going, oh, look, a life-size urban mech from Battletech. That's awesome. Instead of going, well, what's the tea today, gentlemen? And oh god, there was some tea. And I don't particularly like drama in the hobby, but we have to talk about the news and stuff. So fun times. But first, let's talk about Gen Con real quick because it's all the fun stuff. It was definitely a lighter Gen Con than I expected.
When you say lighter, what do you mean? Just like lighter?
It was a little bit muted. Like the stores were a little bit less open, and not all the booths were slightly smaller than they usually are. The play areas were drastically smaller than they usually are. Not as many events are available to sign up for. Even things like the manga library was tinier, and the anime section was tinier, and some companies just didn't show
between stuff.
Nope, it's just they're still recovering. Yeah, some major companies didn't show up, as Greg Sargent says in the chat. And it was the first time I've ever been in a Gen Con and just like walking through the aisles and I'm seeing empty booths. Just completely abandoned booths that no people paid for, their names on it. Nobody ever showed up for the entire convention.
At Gen Con. Yeah. That's a heck of a commitment to not show up.
Yeah. And of course, like the overwhelming gloom of COVID, and also like I applaud them for taking the safety measures of making sure we were all masked up and vaccinated and all that jazz, and they did stick to their guns on that. I only occasionally saw a few people not wearing masks, and for the most part those were like 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. But otherwise, it did make things difficult. We had a hard time hearing people in very crowded spaces because, muffled.
Right.
But I did have some fun. I got to hang out with lots of friends. Got to hang out with Crystal Frazier. I got to hang out with Vanessa Hoskins. I got to hang out with, Luis Loza. I got to hang out with, I'm going to miss so many names. I got to hang out with a whole bunch of my friends at the convention, though of course there were a lot of my friends that couldn't make it, that usually always make it. I didn't get to meet the Owens, and this is the first Gen Con that I haven't got to hug Ryan, so that was also bittersweet. Got to say hi to Sean K. Reynolds. Lots and lots of fun people that I love hanging out with, and got to hang out with them. So all in all, a great big plus. I spent most of the time taking photography classes based on nerdy subjects, like taking miniature photography, which is
that's specialized and neat, like that.
Yeah, I'm going to show off some of those for our video viewers. For our audio listeners, I will describe what I'm showing. But for instance, I took I think this is the best one I took of the whole con, which is Creepy Cave with Frog Person in the back of it, lit creepily with out of focused adventurers up front, and shadowy monster on the background while Star Wars people point guns at them.
But I like it. It's telling a story. Yeah. And that's the one I saw right there.
The glowy frost giant girl.
Yeah, I like the way the light is catching. Was that metallic paint? Because I know that there
This is
is
just
a pre-paint,
the
right?
These are all the pre-painted models. There was
Okay, you're making that
and
look good then, if that's the pre-paint.
yeah, like I had to do something to distract from the eyes. Do not look into her eyes.
They are swirling, Perram. It's been caught mid-frame. She's clearly hypnotizing you.
And Bahir. One of my favorite monsters is a Bahir, which is this big long snake things with way too many arms. It's a centipede dragon. That's what a Bahir is. It's a centipede dragon.
Sure.
And this is actually shot on a completely white background that's brightly lit. But by just focusing the light on the nose and exposure, it blacks it out. I learned all sorts of cool tricks.
That's cool.
For photography.
It's also interesting the way the tail blurs. It almost makes it look like it's moving, like the tail's like lashing out at you or something. I like that.
And when I was playing BattleTech, I saw lots of 3D printed minis on tables being used
at an official Gen Con.
Yeah. Also here's the giant life-size serpent mech that was inflatable for the Catalyst booth. It was really cool.
I kind of loved this. I saw this picture, and for anybody's listening, it's a large kind of like yellow and black big mech. It's like an inflatable, and I kept seeing this picture in people's backgrounds throughout the weekend, and you could see this guy kind of sagging. He was the con goer, slowly getting more and more exhausted over the few days. Yeah. And he was kind of like sideways and hanging. By the end of it, he was my spiritual representative there, as he kind of like sagged away.
And so I had a great time. Like miniature photography, playing a whole lot of BattleTech, specifically Alpha Strike, the new faster playing version of BattleTech.
And it was good.
It was very good. I liked it. I played many games of it. The fun thing is it's BattleTech that you can play in an hour instead of 5. And that's a trend. You're going to notice, listeners, that's a trend I like in my war games, when they can be finished in an hour or 2 instead of 5.
Yeah, well, if you listen to me ever, you'll hear me frequently say, if it's long enough to be a D&D session or a role-playing game session, I'd rather play a role-playing game. I want my war games to be pretty quick. So, yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
We've got Ben Manley in chat. We've got P&D Mike in chat. We've got Greg Sargent in chat. Thank you all very much. 360 days till the next Gen Con. I am definitely hoping the next time's a little bit more of the giant nerd party that I always want it to be.
I saw a lot of people that went though. I was surprised. Like people I didn't think View was going to be there. I didn't think my friend Lori was going to be there. Just a lot of people who went. I was like, there was some FOMO a little bit. But
and I came home.
Then you came home.
And then that's when all the news hit. So let's go ahead and get into the bigger of the two stories. This one didn't take place at Gen Con. This one took place yesterday while I got home. And that is that GW Games Workshop and Cults 3D are at it. Well, not so much at it. GW sent a list to Cults. This is all through screenshot. Like, this is like not the way I love getting my sources, but they have since verified that this information is accurate.
Okay. But I know originally they were using the word alleged, but it's been a little more confirmed? Question mark.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to that, this is screenshots from a Discord chat or a Discord server, in which Cults 3D says, "Hello, this is Pierre, co-founder of Cults. I'm posting here to inform that Games Workshop has just contacted us through their lawyers to ask us to remove more than 200 creations that infringe, according to them, on their copyright. In this list, there are 65 paying models that we have rejected. The users who are part of this list and who have at least one creation rejected from the site will be informed by email. They will be able to edit their model to remove the copyrighted terms. If the editing is sufficient, the creation will be accepted again. If you need to modify URL, just contact us at email." Concerning the free models, we have decided not to delete them because of the notion of fan art, and will keep fighting on this point. From now on, we have a rather long list of terms that will trigger moderation when your paid creations are uploaded. So try to avoid... I lost my place here. For now, we have a rather long list, so try to avoid as much as possible these terms when uploading. I have attached the document. If there is a problem, you will receive a message informing you that your model violates the rule, and you can edit it without worrying until it is good. We prefer to be perfectly transparent with you about Games Workshop's request because we are convinced that it is by working together, creators, platforms, and brands, that we will make cool things happen. I left in the typo. If you have questions or remarks, please just let us know. I'll do my best to reply. And then there's an attached RTF file with said keywords. Spiky Bits has got a lot of this documented on their website. If you want to go look at the screenshots. And they also have a list of the words, which include things that are probably obvious, such as Games Workshop, Warhammer, Sigmar, 40K, Adeptus, Drukari, Necrons, T''AU, Inari, Adneth, Kane, Caradron, Lumineth, Seraphon, and it's a big long list of very obviously.
So do you think, well, sorry, are you ready to field some of my questions about this?
Yeah.
I have my first question is it because people are just being lazy when they post and putting the actual trademark names on these things? Is that a thing? Is that a problem?
So sometimes that happens, and sometimes they put them into the keywords.
Okay,
That's where you'll often see a lot of this.
Okay.
Or in the description.
Right.
And ultimately, and I don't want to get focused too much on the keywords. That is a separate issue. Ultimately, it's GW had provided a list of 200 models that they said violated their intellectual property. And Colts' response to that is to, of the 65 that were identified by GW that were paid files, they took them down and asked the people to do it. The interesting thing is the ones that were free files, they said no.
Oh, okay.
And later comments are that they are working in contact with GW's lawyers, so we do not know how that is ultimately going to go one way or the other.
Right.
And there's
this very fan art discussion, basically.
This is the fan art discussion, and the phrase fan art is interesting. Now, first things first, because we're going to have to get into the talking about intellectual property law, and it's different from country to country. It's very complicated, and I am not a intellectual property lawyer or a lawyer of any kind.
Nor am I.
Nothing I say should be construed as legal advice. Now, saying all that, I have been working in and around the game industry for a very long time now, and are very familiar with the common things that happen regarding IP law and copyright claims, and just been following these sorts of things for a very, very, very long time because I'm very nerdy about them. So take that what you will. But I will say what Colts is doing here is both interesting and potentially dangerous to Colts. Because we call things fan art. And that is a distinction that copyright law doesn't give much credit to.
Okay.
Because while charging for an item or not is absolutely one of the factors of many that are considered within copyright violations, in intellectual property, we have to be very careful here, because copyright, trademark, IP, and visual identity are all very different things. When it comes to copyright, and they could be asking for things to be taken down for many of those. All those lists of terms, that's not a copyright thing. Those are trademarks that they are asking and protecting, or most of them are trademarks, and that's trademark law. That's a completely different thing than copyright law. When people say they have to protect their copyrights or else they lose them, no, they don't. That's a trademark thing, not a copyright thing. And then there is how similar is something before it is a copyright violation, and how close is too far. And thankfully, we have some really good guidance on this, specific to Games Workshop, thanks to the Chapter House suit and decision, in which GW sued Chapter House for what they said was violating their IP, and GW lost the case on several of those terms. So we have a list of things that the courts have said, nuh-uh, that's too far. GW immediately not immediately, but pretty soon after, changed a whole lot of their faction names.
Right.
After that decision.
Earlier in the 2000s, right? That was kind of went through.
Yeah. So
we have some suggested parody from chat. We have Skirmish Mace 39K from James and Battle Mall 42K. So I think that those would both work okay.
Yes. And I've heard some very, very fun suggestions there too. And ultimately, it comes down to whether or not a 3D model is a copy of a Games Workshop thing or uses Games Workshop's trademark symbols on it, or their protected identity or graphic visual identity, and whether or not something is inspired by and a proxy. And that's a very fine line that ultimately can only be decided in a courtroom. Right. There is no hard and fast rules to follow. This is too close or this isn't too close. And that line is often very odd. I mean, I've talked about it before, where we've seen creators that have worked with or have talked with the GWIP lawyers and the very specific things they asked to be changed. A great example of this right now that is super relevant is Heroes Infinite, who just recently released the Arcadian Elves 2 set as part of their monthly packages. And it was odd that they even announced it, because at the time they announced it last month, the first set, while released to backers, was never released on their previous, because that was a case where the models flew too close to the sun, and they had to make some changes. Yeah. And now it's interesting looking at the early versions of those models. Like one of the chakrams that one of the characters is holding got changed, and that seems to be the only major change there.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and what ultimately was deemed okay.
I think I downloaded that set from the original, though. That's interesting. Maybe I should be able to check them out. I'll have to go through.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see some side-by-side comparisons of that set to see what was changed. And we can see things like Dark Age Studios with the backpacks on their Space Knights had to be changed, and the shoulder pads aren't the same. It seems to be for Space Marines specifically. They really care about backpacks and shoulder pads, and helmets.
Their jetpacks and and a tank,
which ultimately isn't surprising, because when you think about when we talk about what people look like on a mini, it's shoulders, faces, and weapons is what people care about. And that backpack design has not changed much for Space Marines, going all the way back to the very first Space Marines released in the middle.
It's uncanny. I found a bit kicking around one of my things the other day, and I looked at it, I was like, this is just like that one, side by side.
Right. So this is why this is very complicated. But why I think this is a dangerous line for cults to be taken is the paid files, obviously taking them down was probably the safe call for cults. And what I'm saying is not whether or not it was the right thing to do, or whether or not GW has a case. We ultimately do not know what 200 minis because we only have this screen cap that was then verified, and that some of the artists involved have also commented that yes, this is what happened. We do not know what the 200 minis were, so we can't just look through them and see what they were. The 65 that were taken down, we don't know the full list of those. We do not know what GW's response is to this. And usually GW does not respond to these subjects except for through lawyers.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but when these requests come through, usually the hosts, the companies we've talked about how they just assume GW is right. Like Patreon has very recently taken down things just because GW sent the letters. And that's because they want to keep what's called safe harbor status, which is I'm not responsible as a service provider for what my users do on my service, as long as I follow some basic rules. And one of those rules is when now for American laws, the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, this will be different for different countries, but most countries are in treaties that respect each other's copyright laws. So the DMCA is very relevant no matter which country you're in. So a DMCA request is basically saying, a company saying, this content violates my intellectual property. Take it down immediately, service. and the service has to do it. It doesn't get to play yes, no. It doesn't get to play lawyer. That stuff, they have to take it down, and then the courts figure it out. If you can challenge the DMCA request, theoretically there are supposed to be penalties for filing false DMCA requests, though historically that has not happened. Historically, see some of even completely abusive and egregious uses of DMCA has been gone unpunished over the years. But either way, you're not supposed to make a judgment as the service host. And by making a judgment, you can strip yourself of that safe harbor. And then suddenly the host can be liable for that damage now, instead of just the user who posted the content, which is why I'm surprised that Cults is making the stance like they are, because that is not the safe stance as a business to take.
Well, but by taking down the pay ones, are they reducing the damages to zero?
No.
I mean, no. Okay. Because people are using the okay, but people are using the free fan art ones, and it's theoretically costing sales, right?
Okay. And that's the thing, is like, fan art is a term we know and is totally real, but it doesn't really legally mean much just because I make this violation of their IP and put it up on the internet for free doesn't mean that I didn't violate their IP, and doesn't mean that they can't ask me to take it down.
Well, I mean, you run into this visual art a lot, where there's Patreons for people to do fan art, quote unquote. And the Patreon is supporting them as an artist, and you don't necessarily get those rewards or whatever. And some of them even will go to cons and sell those prints, which that's shaky.
A complicated situation where sometimes, like with Marvel, famously, they were doing a $1 license you could do to sell fan art at cons. So like that was actually allowed on purpose.
Right.
Most companies look the other way when it comes to fan art, because up to a point it just helps them.
Right.
But GOW is incredibly litigious, incredibly historically litigious, and has taken that stance very publicly. I mean, most famously, recently they did some very interesting decisions with the YouTube content creators right before the launch of Warhammer Plus, and for fear of what they might do, some really beloved series, like, does the Emperor have a text-to-speech engine, which was a parody fan art creation, which because it's parody and because of its free nature should have been protected under most fair use copyright laws, but even then they played it safe and shut down. Just because, and also, just because something, again, all this has to be settled in courts, but just because something is legal and right doesn't mean that the GW lawyers can't come making the assertions and you have to defend yourself.
Right.
And most people can't afford to fight GW's lawyers. We talk about the Chapter House suit a lot because that's a famous example of GW losing in court for the very few times that it happens. Chapter House went bankrupt because of that suit.
Yeah, even
winning, it bankrupted the company.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I know the shoestring budgets a lot of gaming companies work under, and it would destroy most people.
Yeah. So that is the current news on that front. We're still waiting to see what comes next. We do know that Cults has verified that the screenshots provide accurate information that's been backed up by some creators, and that the list of words is indeed the list of words.
Okay.
And so we'll be soon to see. I would say that if there are things on Cults that you want, now is a great time to get them.
Go get them,
So regardless of your views on like what is too far and what isn't too far, if historically this is a rocky situation, and companies eventually comply with these requests. I don't know what Cults will ultimately do. It's interesting that they're taking this stance. I just hope that it doesn't hurt the community as a whole.
Like what do you think, just like because Cults will get taken down, or what other consequences do you think for the community there'll be?
Well, I mean, ultimately, like if they fight it enough, and they lose their safe harbor status, GW could go after cults themselves as violating and bring them into a suit instead, treating them like a pirate site instead of just a provider. Now, I don't know that will happen. That's a bit of an extreme situation to be happening, and it's way too early to assume that will happen. But that's in the realms of possibility space, and one of the reasons that people, groups like Patreon and Thingiverse, don't fight these requests. They just take them down.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My own personal feelings aside, I'm just talking about what has been historically done and safe. Personally, I don't like to use prints that are very much one-to-one copies to GW items. In that case, I would just go buy the GW item if I just want the GW item, but I very much like some of the really cool proxies and a unique and the original art that is available inspired by GW stuff. Like my high elves are very much inspired by GW's high elves, but they look so much better. The sculpts are so much better.
Well, you know me, I like just the weirder the better. So like I'm excited by things like Puppets Wars variants and
like Puppets Wars look nothing like GW's concepts. You can tell that that's a Space Marine inspired thing,
but that's about the end of it. Yeah,
and their take on the space bugs are better than Tyranids. They look a lot better than Tyranids, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely a lot of their models are upscale. Yeah, there's a couple other ones that, like, if I want to make like a, because I'd probably play OBR, I would make something more unique, because you can do that. You can, do custom army lists, or you can just pick one of the more obscure other armies in it. And I would probably do something like, I don't know, Fantastical Skulls has these really cool, they're calling them Monarch people that kind of remind me of Flying Eldar models, but they have butterfly wings, and they're just really neat looking, very unusual. And that's the sort of thing I would go for. I don't want, like, if I wanted a Space Marine, I mean, you're right. I could just go down to the GW store, save myself the print time and the headache, and just buy them. I probably couldn't buy very many though.
GW stuff is expensive. It's definitely expensive. I'm thinking of some other ones, like Artisan Guild's Wood Elves are wild, like World of Warcrafty inspired awesome elves that look absolutely nothing like GW Wood Elves.
Right.
And orcs. So like the entire realm of orcs has been replaced with World of Warcraft inspired orcs as opposed to GW inspired orcs, and that is a lovely world to live in.
Right. I think Ben is jumping ahead on your next story.
Yeah. Do we have much more to talk about GW and Colt's situation? Or
I could speculate about Fallout all day, but no, I don't think we need to dwell on that.
We will keep you updated as we learn more. Then I mentioned that, like, stuff went down at Gen Con.
Yeah.
Stuff went down at Gen Con.
But you were playing Battletech, right?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. So I took a picture because Ben Stanley in chat is pointing out Privateer Press has made some really interesting news. That first, they're still doing things, which is some shock to me. They had been real quiet for a while.
They've been doing D&D stuff, actually, and that's where I've been following them. Is they've been doing a lot of 5e compatible D&D content. 3 Kickstarters,
sounds
actually.
Fun.
Yeah,
like they started making Iron Kingdoms as a setting, right? As a third-party D20 setting.
They now have updated it to 5e and expanded it. There's way more stuff for it.
Cool. It's a cool setting. I love the idea of playing characters in a very steampunk, magic punk thing. So, and I played War Machine, their war game based on that universe for a long time. I have 3 armies in that, and I still have most of it packed away somewhere, including the big giant Signar Colossus mech, which was super fun. Because you have just big old stomping mech this big, and it just launches lightning pods across the field. That's fun. So they announced that there's going to be a Mark IV of War Machine. So War Machine is coming back, and instead of traditional manufacturing, they are going to 3D print the models for this game. They're not providing the files. So no, there's not. You're not going to be able to go, at least as of now, go to Privateer Press and sign up for Privateer Press monthly and get all your War Machine files. That would be super cool, Privateer Press. I'm
that
just
would be
saying.
way cool.
Yeah, you
because
could
those
probably
are
charge
awesome
more
minis. Yeah,
than most companies. Then you charge 10. People would pay 20. Or you could just sell them a la carte Privateer Press, and people would pay probably as much as buying the mini in person for the file to print it themselves. But they're going to be 3D printing as their means of manufacturing instead of just sending it out the traditional way.
Okay.
And
what does that
I
mean
got to
for
see
LJS? Like, that's interesting.
Well, that means the models they send to the LGS will be 3D printed models,
but they'll still
that
be
are stocked on
distributing
the
them.
shelves.
Okay,
yeah, they're going to. It's just the means of production, but this does make some interesting concepts. First, I got to see them while I was down there. They were actually selling some of these at the booth. I didn't buy any, but I did go ahead and take some pictures of the 3D printed and painted versions, and they look super pretty. It's the red people versus the blue people. I forget the red people's name, and Signar is the blue people. And the mod, it's all new mechs, all new soldiers. The other stuff, as I understand it, is going to be called legacy models. So like old stuff may or may not be usable in the new game. Cool things about it is it's all 3D printed, and they're all the mechs do something that we were kind of already doing, and they come with holes in them in advance for magnets, so that all the variants of the mech can be magnetized, so that you don't have to buy the kit 3 times to have the 3 different versions.
So you can like hot swap the guns and stuff on
them?
Yeah. Nice.
It's super cool. And repose it, because one of my favorite things is they designed them with those joints to be posable. And what I would do is what a lot of people would do, which is I would pick my Warcaster, and then their mech would be posed identical to the sculpt of the Warcaster.
I think you mentioned that, yeah.
Yeah, so it was fun. And so you can repose them, and using magnets, you can repose them, swap out the arms, swap out the guns, swap out the heads and all that jazz, pivot the torsos. Lots of fun with magnets. And this opens up a lot of possibility space, because one of the advantages that 3D printing has provided the hobby, that our Australian friends know very well, is that shipping things around the world is very expensive.
Right.
But if contracting a printer in Australia is not super expensive, and that way they could set up printing distribution contracts around the world, so that they could actually distribute the game at an affordable rate. Because right now, especially with all the shipping situations, the times and cost involved is craziness.
Yeah,
they were selling them for $75 for the boxes, and I believe this is like the blue set is what came in the box. So it's like a dozen minis and one really big one for $75, which is about comparable to buying them in metal or hard plastic back in the day. So the prices are comparable to other games of the same quality. The sculpts look fantastic, and I wish that good news is where this story stopped.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they had some kits to sell that while they were there. And so, what was I saying? Okay, so they had kits to sell while they were there that they had printed up, and you could buy for $75. You could buy one of the army kits.
Right.
Some of the people so a couple of the people were posting up. One particular posted up that they received a model in the kit that had white residue on it, and they I'm leaving their name out of this, but if you want to see this covered in much more detail, Blackjack Legacy has released 2 videos on the subject on their YouTube channel that goes in very good depth of all of this, and much better than I'm able to here very quickly. But basically, they posted up pictures that showed very visible layer lines, layers slipping on the print, caked in white residue in the cracks. And they said that there was uncured resin because it made their finger burn. And now later, Privateer Press had at least a statement saying, essentially, I have the statements here, but they have released a statement essentially saying that there were some issues with the cleaning of their earlier prints that they caught, and that their clean cycle, they need to replace it breaks down to they needed to replace the vat in the liquid in their cleaning cycle more frequently than they were.
Right. Yeah. I mean, any alcohol will build up a little resin residue, and it does do that white filming. Yeah, all the time. It doesn't mean it's not necessarily not cured there.
Yeah. So the user returned to that model to the Privateer Press booth, and they inspected it. Privateer Press says that there wasn't any uncured resin, which makes sense, because if it got hit with the UVs enough to get that white residue on it, what that is basically the cleaning slurry, or what that traditionally is, in my experience, is the cleaning slurry that has been settled in the cracks and then get hardened, and then that makes a white residue. It's not uncured resin. It's a different thing. And
right.
In fact, the fact that it is white means it has been cured.
Yeah. But it's also like it's distributed weird, and it doesn't have the right texture because it's not as dense. But it's not. It's been cured, because that's why it changes color like that.
Privateer Press has released a statement basically saying they already knew that happened with some of the batches, and that they took steps already to change that vat much more frequently to prevent that from happening in the future. And that was pretty much that. So if you've got a bad batch, they're happy to swap out your models with some fresh models. Most of the models that were being posted pictures of, that are flooded on their page all over the internet and the War Machine groups, do not have that in it, and look perfectly clean. The layer lines aren't super obvious or visible, like they were in the pictures that were shared with the white residue. I definitely think that batch definitely had some problems, and this is because it's the first batch, probably had problems. But overall,
James was asking, they've addressed the problem. What resin they were using, like, or how they disclosed that? Like what brand?
They have not disclosed the brand of their resin, or even how they do their clean cycle. They actually did detail a lot of the details on the clean cycle, but not what chemicals were used. I've been burned by resin. That happens if you. So the way that can happen most is if you get some resin on you that you do not notice, and then it gets cured on your skin, like going out into the sunlight or UV hitting it, and it can burn a little bit. It can get burned real bad if you leave it on you for extended periods of time. Like the famous photo of a leg like all burned up with resin, it was the result of a spill onto the guy's leg, and he left it on there overnight because they didn't know he didn't know he had it. I've gotten resin in my eye once before, and that burned like crazy.
That does burn, especially if you go outside. I've had that happen.
Yeah. Mostly resin, besides the skin, is an irritant and an allergen.
Right.
So if you're and also you lose your resistance over time the more you're exposed to the resin, and it becomes more and more. All in all, usually when I get resin on me, it's not a huge deal. Wash my hands immediately, and be done with it.
Take a shower.
Yeah. You don't want to leave it on there for extended period of times. You definitely don't want to do it on purpose ever. So I do wear gloves, and I wear my glasses when I'm filling with it. And I do take safety precautions when I'm working with the resin, because you should. You don't want this on your skin. I don't want to overstate, like say this is horribly dangerous stuff. It's just like if you're like working with bleach or working with alcohol or working with acetone, this is a similar, treat the chemical with respect.
P&D Mike says he accidentally drank some resin, a very small dose.
Oh my gosh, that is the worst.
Yeah,
that is the most dangerous. Do not ingest resin. It is incredibly toxic to drink.
Yeah, yikes. I've drank paint water on accident before with the coffee paint water swap, but never resin. That's horrible.
No, gosh, oh my gosh. Yeah, do not drink the forbidden milkshake.
Forbidden milkshake. Nice.
So, the serious, I don't want to overstate that. I don't want to imply that resin is horrible, dangerous things, but treat it like power tools. You treat it with respect. It is a poisonous material. If you drink it, it is an irritant on your skin. You don't want it in your eyes. And you probably want to use a respirator if you're going to be working with it hot and heavy. Also, if you're sanding resin at any point in time, like you've printed a model and you have to use a respirator if you're sanding it. Yeah. Okay, so then
surely that was the end of the drama. No, it was not. Okay.
No. While this was happening, Broken Anvil, who has many former Privateer Press employees working for them, they posted up a statement in the middle of it that they have since apologized for by talking about how, oh gosh, I don't know how to go into this without here's the statement they released. The BAM team is well known for our expertise in 3D printing for a wide variety of applications, especially our tabletop miniatures. While it's common to see prominent build layers in 3D prints produced on first and second gen consumer grade resin printers, any sufficiently maintained modern high resolution printer stocked with high quality resin has the capability to produce models with far less obvious artifacting. It's also possible to virtually eliminate all visible build layers through thoughtful orientation of a model on the build plate, a critical quality assurance process we employ for all of our pre-supported Broken Anvil monthly models. We want to ensure that excessive artifacting won't interfere with our subscribers' painting experience, especially as applying washes and dry brushing will painfully highlight every defect on the surface of a print. When purchasing 3D printed minis from any major manufacturer, don't settle for poor quality prints priced to match premium resin minis. Come see us at Gen Con booth 1834 and check out our printed mini offerings from the August BAM Patreon release, Curse of the Emerald City. See the difference for yourself. Oh, and please feel free to zoom in. That was their initial response that they have since apologized for.
Yes.
Indeed. And then they have since released an apology for it that reads, to BAM fam and table community, we made a post yesterday regarding 3D printed products that stirred a large response. We want you to know that we heard you, and upon further reflection, we need to apologize for our tone. There's a lot to love and passion that flows in this industry, and we understand people take immense pride in the games they invest time and money into play. We ourselves feel strongly that all players deserve high-quality items from companies like ourselves in return for that support. However, that passion led us to make a careless statement that doesn't reflect or support the type of community we want to build and represent. While the core of our statement remains true, we realize we also bring tens of thousands of hours of printing R&D to our process that is difficult to attain for many teams. In the spirit of doing better and putting community first, we want to put our money where our mouth is. To any community that wants to level up their 3D printing operations, we would like to offer free consultation and producing printing and share our professional knowledge just as we do with our BAM community. We want to help ensure all players everywhere receive the highest quality product they can and assist industry cohorts in making the best choices when transitioning to new technologies. Our goal as a team must always be to build up the community at large for long-term health and success. And we want to thank you all for keeping us accountable for that. We look forward to making new connections and making good on our ideals going forward. Yeah, so they threw a little shade during it, and it didn't go over well with a lot of their community. I think it was probably a good choice to release that apology myself.
Sure. And, if they stand by it, hopefully it'll help everybody. They're actually, I have been in their Discord, and they do offer a lot of support for printing for sure. So now if they just would put Ribbonstone into their STL stuff for purchase, I would really be happy with that. But
so why are we even talking about this?
Why are we?
Because the fact that Privateer Press, a huge mini company, is moving into 3D printing spaces is important. And if the concept that, oh no, Privateer Press is releasing unsafe product could hurt resin printing as a hobby as a whole. So I wanted to make sure that the facts got out there exactly as they needed to our community, which is that, hey, this is exactly what happened, or this is what people involved said what happened, and this is what is going on in the community. At this point in time, it looks like, yeah, I've done that myself. I've not changed my cleaning water and then get the white stuff, and it sucks. And sometimes it can reduce detail, sometimes it doesn't. Like some of those zombies that I printed and painted were done like that, where it was just like, oh, this came out of a batch that wasn't cleaned as much as I wanted to. Put a layer of primer on it, paint it, it's fine.
Who cares?
No problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do need to change that water. But it does look like uncured resin wasn't released into the wilds, which is good.
That's good.
I mean, if nothing else, making sure that all your prints get a good old dose of UV is the best and safest thing you can do.
Well, and I've had prints where I've left them hanging upside down on the plate, and they've been like in the printer, no like fumes or whatever, but like they've been in that airspace for a little longer than I probably would have liked. And I've noticed a lot of times those prints come out really shiny looking, and they look like it's really difficult to tell if they've cured properly because they've just got that glossy, weird texture to them because of that. And I would be lying if I said I haven't missed, oh, look, this one actually is still a little tacky or whatever. But usually that's why I've just moved up to doing 2 cycles through my curing station, just as a precaution, because I'm not usually like unless I've got a game like right then. I'm not like hovering over my curing station, so why not just run it a second time just to be sure and add a little extra layer of safety.
Plus, like extra UV curing, and then I prime the models, and like once it's underneath several layers of paint and varnish, there's the risk of any damage from the minis is minute.
Right.
But be safe when resin printing. Do clean your products, and if you did happen to receive one of those not so great Privateer Press boxes, one of the ones that didn't come out so great, get in contact with Privateer Press. It sounds like they're very happy to send you a good looking set.
Yeah, I've had a lot of interaction with their role playing team. I got to actually play with them at GameholeCon, and they're super good customer support and always willing to make things right. So I'm sure they'll do the same for the prints.
And I've got some good news to end things with.
You like good news?
I like good news. And that is, Reptilian Overlords, which is a mini company I've been chatting up a little bit since I went looking for space soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
They do very fantastic modular kits for sci-fi games specifically, and modern military stuff. So they've got really cool space Vietnam soldiers. They've got really cool space Russian soldiers, and just normal space soldiers of all varieties. And they even have some really cool German fantasy soldiers. That is probably one of my favorite kits to use for Mordheim.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and they really lean on the modular kit. Well, Wargames Atlantic has announced a partnership with them to take one of their more popular stats, the Space Vietnam stuff. So your what's the faction there that's supposed to be the not Krieg, it's the other one.
If they're not bugs or shooting lasers out of their eyes, I'm probably not the guy to ask.
I'm failing as a Warhammer fan. This is a complete brain fart on my Catachan. Okay. They would make great proxies for Catachan. That they're taking one of their sets and releasing it as a hard plastic kit for their usual stupidly cheap prices. So if you really like that set and don't want to print it, and want a whole lot of models, because the Wargames Atlantic kits come with a whole lot of models on those sprues. I really love their kits. They're wonderful. And remember when we were talking about the cost of printing, and I went, well, when you start to get into Wargames Atlantic, it's about the same as printing it yourself cost wise. So why not just go, like, this is one of the cases where it's kind of a break even thing. So that's great. So you can buy it pre-made on hard plastic sprues, and they match 1-to-1 with the 3D printed versions you can print from home. So hey, if you want them in hard plastic, this means that more people will be getting more Reptilian Overlords models than ever before, and it means War Games Atlantic has some cool model kits to add to their range. They've got a bunch of really cool sci-fi stuff, including a spider kit that you can build giant spiders for fantasy that goblins can ride. Their goblin kits come with saddles so that you can make the goblins ride the giant spiders. But their giant spiders also come with cyborg spider options to make space spiders with laser guns.
Well, I'm all about space spiders with laser guns.
That would make an interesting tier of the option. Like, no space bugs, space spiders.
Nice. Yeah. So it looks like in the chat that blasted camouflage. I'm looking. They just let us know they have a non-humanoid alien frontier going on, and they look pretty neat. So check them out. There's definitely there's something that kind of looks, I don't know what, almost beholdery with little pods on it, and I'm all about beholdery things, so that looks pretty cool.
Hey, we love non-human options available to the games because there's not a lot of those out there, so more the merrier.
Absolutely. And
we're coming up on time. Is there anything else you want to shout out to, Krista, before we bounce?
Sure. Got two. Just as a reminder, I like Lost Souls. That Frontier is also going. It'll be, I think it ends the 24th. So got a couple more weeks on it. The menus are really neat. I've actually been painting up some right now. So I've been really enjoying it. If you like your spooky boys, they're kind of heavily armored spectral undead would be what I would describe them as, but they're really neat.
The set does look neat. I played it on the first set. I was surprised they were doing a second set so soon.
Right. And so similar, right? Like, because obviously the sculptors are very talented, but I was really surprised when we're leaning into the spooky floating boys with the heavy plate armor pretty hard. To the point where, honestly, I accidentally, because one of the cool things about the Frontier is you get everything that they've done already, like not stretch goals, but everything from the base pledge is there immediately. So like I actually printed up some stuff and downloaded them in my file, and then I realized I couldn't tell which came. I had to go back to the campaign page to see, do I actually have some campaign 2 stuff printed, because they were so similar. But it's really cool. The designs are different enough, and like obviously you can paint them up and make them look really cool for like different factions or whatever if you want, but they, like casual inspection, you need to know where they're from or you lose track. Very, very similar.
Awesome.
Speaking of Frontiers, also Duncan Shadow launched a Mythos thing, which I was a little surprised. Duncan Shadow, to me, like that's where I got my cute mouselings and like a lot of like little fun, fluffy dudes, and very kind of like unusual. The
zombie frogs.
Yes, spectral and zombie frogs. Actually, I don't know if they did ghost ones, but zombie frogs for sure. And so I was a little surprised to see the Lovecraft one. I'd say they're very comparable to Cthulhu Wars, and could be used in that game if you've lost some pieces, but or you just want big Cthulhu things. And they're huge. They're big guys. Yeah.
The other thing Duncan does best is he does really awesome giants that lean into the giant word. Like, this isn't just a large scale mini. This thing is on a 6x6 base if you want to put his hill giant down, and it's glorious, and I love it. And he has been doing a lot of Cthulhu stuff over the years, and like especially Fishman has been done. So I'm not super surprised, but that definitely was some of his older work. Before he started doing the Animal Folk. So that really so I'm glad to see that he's revisiting it, and it might be a great chance to. Duncan stuff's great. He's been around. He's been doing stuff in the hobby for ages and ages and ages, and we're hoping to get him on the show soon.
Hopefully.
Yep. All right, everyone. If you want to help out the show, the best thing you can do is give us a rating on iTunes or Spotify, or to like and comment on this video if you're watching us on YouTube. You can find more of our content over at printyourgames.com. You can find us at facebook.com/printyourgames or at twitter.com/printyourgames. And until next time, I'm Jeffrey Thacker, also known as Perram.
I'm Kristen Sowards, also known as Lost Spheres, and don't forget to use your screen protector.